Numbers, and they've been getting worse as the day has grown on. 58 souls lost last night, 58 people now confirmed dead, over 500 wounded in this shooting in Las Vegas. About this man, the gunman, not much is known. As you see there, sources are reporting the gunman fired out of 2 different hotel windows. We've been showing that all day, and that he broke them out to do that. Stephen Paddock, his name, 64 years old, a fairly recent resident of Mesquite, Nevada. He was living in Florida, decided to go back to Nevada because of his allergies, apparently. His brother was interviewed outside his home in Florida, referred to his brother, the gunman, now dead, in one of what may be one of the more enduring quotes of the day as, "He was just a guy," a phrase you hear all the time. And in a way, it expressed his brother's shock and surprise that he was capable of this. You also hear that all the time in this business. A massive trauma for Las Vegas. This was a Sunday night music festival. As you can see, there was VIP seating. There were tents up on the sides to both sides of the stage, and a large black stage. But in the middle were most of the general admission fans of the concert. That put them, sadly, in the line of fire. We're happy to be joined by a man who was an eyewitness to the shooting and has been willing to talk to us about it. Brian Claypool is with us by phone from Las Vegas. Brian, when did you realize that what you could hear were shots?
Well, Brian, first of all, I'm sitting in the Mandalay Bay as we speak. I finally made it back to the hotel. All the streets are closed off. But the police allowed people that were staying here to get in the hotel. I was eerily staying on the 24th floor, so I shared the same elevator with this lunatic who massacred all these innocent people. And I will tell you, before I tell you about the shots fired, that the view, I was supposed to leave town Sunday night at 7:50 and miss the evening event with Jake Owen and Jason Aldean. But one of the reasons why I stayed, Brian, is because the view that I had from my room, I had the Las Vegas Strip view, and I looked out my room and I saw the entire complex for the Route 91 Harvest. It was absolutely beautiful. It was such a panoramic view. So that was a big reason why I moved my flight to this morning and stayed. And then here we have a lunatic 7 floors above me who looks at that same view and he wants to kill with that view. So that to me was so eerie. And so I stayed. I was sitting in the VIP section that you mentioned, close to the stage. I was in the front row. I initially heard a couple pops. I thought that might be fireworks or firecrackers. Looked up in the sky, didn't see any smoke or any lighting, so I was worried. And what was eerie, Brian, is that Jason Aldean kind of hesitated during that moment. He stopped singing for a few seconds. That worried me too. That was a red flag. And then I heard some more sounds that sounded like shots. Wasn't sure. But the moment that seared my soul, Brian, was when I looked at Jason Aldean and he literally threw his guitar down, dropped it to the floor, and sprinted to the side. At that moment, I jumped up and I was trying to make my way out. By the time he even got to the aisle to try to get out, that's when the first barrage of it felt like it went on for about 30 seconds. It was nonstop. And just laying flat down, praying that I don't get hit, trying to pull people down, Brian, because a lot of people were still frozen in the moment. They weren't moving. They were still sitting in their seats. They didn't really realize what was going on.
When did you notice people getting hit?
Well, I meant those people getting hit what happened then is there was this onslaught of shots. It just felt like World War III. It felt like it would never end. Just one after the other, praying that it would stop. And finally it stopped about 30 seconds later. Then I got up and I started running down the stairs, and that's when I noticed one gentleman had been shot in the shoulder, another man shot in the sternum area. They were stumbling northbound, so they're trying to go north away from the stage area. That's when a very heroic man, he summoned about 15 of us into this small little room that was kind of under the bleachers. It could look like a production area under the bleachers. So it was pick your poison at that moment. I mean, when you're in a situation like that, you're in split-second decision making that could cost you your life or not. So the poison I picked was, I'm going to go in this room. So I got in that room, and my heart was broken. I initially got in there, and I see 6 young women, probably in their early 20s, about 20 to 22, kneeling they were on their knees, huddled in a corner, crying hysterically. And my heart was just, I'm telling you, I get emotional talking about it. But at that moment, I went from, okay, I'm going to die, to, wait a minute, I don't want to be like the Orlando shooting, because we're now in a small room. See, and at that moment, we didn't know where the shooter was. Nobody knew in there. We thought they were right outside the fence. We were right next to the fence that's contiguous to Las Vegas Boulevard. We're thinking somebody's going to hop that fence, and then we're done, because we're in that room and can't move. So for a moment, I'm thinking, oh, my God, I'm going to die like the Orlando shooting. I've got a little girl, 11 years old. I don't want to die like this. But then I went from that to, I shifted gears. And I went into, I said a prayer. I tried to calm these young women down. We waited again till the second round of shooting stopped. Thank God it stopped. I then peeked my head out the door. That's the moment I felt most vulnerable, because I was then facing the Mandalay Bay, looking to see. Thank God there was a police officer there. By the way, Brian, police officers in Las Vegas, stellar. They were the most brave human beings you will ever imagine. And one of the police officers is ready to hop the fence to go fight this shooter, and he screams out, "Run to the north, run now." And that's when I summoned then everybody out of that little room, and then we ran further toward the north to try to exit the arena that way.
I don't think I've ever covered an event like this where more people have said incredible things about the first responders in the moment. Some of them in plain clothes, some of them off duty, some of them uniform, but not with Kevlar, not with riot gear. Again, just, police officers working the perimeter at an otherwise great event. And I am guessing security was about the last thing on your mind. It was a beautiful night in Las Vegas.
Brian, you raise a great point, because your prior guess is right on. Country music followers are the nicest people on the planet. They're celebrating life, and that's what the music signifies. And there was a moment, Brian, about 15 minutes before the shooting, where I was about 10 feet away from the general admission section. I saw 2 Las Vegas police officers. I hope they survived. They were standing in the infield, talking, chit-chatting with a couple girls and a couple guys. I got to tell you, at that moment, I'm like, you know what I said to myself? I said, wow, they've got the easiest job on the planet. To go to this festival with all these wonderful people, and they're nice, and everybody's talking. I'm like, what a great job they have. How ironic, 20 minutes later, I see one of the officers jumping that fence to go take on a shooter. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Tell me more about the crowd. A lot of families, a lot of young people.
Yeah, Brian, you ran the gamut. That's why I'm heartbroken. You ran the gamut from kids. There were kids there. There were kids there with parents. There were teenagers. There were, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I even saw some elderly folks there. There was a cross-section of this country. Every age group imaginable was at this festival. And that is what's so heartbreaking about the whole thing. And I was just walking over here. It is somber. People that still have their wristbands on were in tears. I'm right across from where it happened now. That was a traumatic moment for me to come back to the scene of the crime. But I can't even imagine not one person. There wasn't a mean bone in that festival last night. And for one person to lose their lives is absolutely devastating.
We keep showing this picture of this wall of ambulances, and it's among the sadder sights from last night, because eventually they were all filled. Eventually, several of them made return trips more than once.
Yeah, Brian, people were driving their car. But the people next to me, real nice couple from Austin, Texas, I got to know over the 2 days I was there. And they had a young woman they made it to their car, pounding on their car. A woman shot in the stomach, begging to be transported to the hospital. Somebody else picked her up and took her. But I mean, this is something you see in a movie. You don't see in reality in the United States. But on a positive note, I mean, it's hard to think positive in such a dark moment. But I will tell you, people stepping up again, left and right. I mean, in that gentleman at the door, his body was exposed. He's getting us in that room. people helping injured people who've been shot, police officers, going to bat. I mean, if anything can be taken away from it, I mean, people in this, we got a lot of racial divide now, and the country's not getting along. But I got to tell you, in the deepest, darkest moments last night, I mean, there were a lot of heroes.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and predict that if there were Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in that crowd, they probably made a huge difference. A, knowing how to handle themselves in incoming fire. B, knowing how to handle wounds and treat them and dress them immediately and make them survivable, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Brian. I realize this is nasty stuff and horrible memories from last night, but people like you have really helped us kind of set the scene and realize, kind of narrating these pictures, these awful pictures we have been watching for hours now. Brian Claypool, kind enough to join us by telephone from Las Vegas. Best of luck to you. Our thanks again.
Thank you, Brian.
Among those who've made their way out west to Las Vegas is Lester Holt. He's on the ground there. And Lester, I'm told you have a notable interview with a witness who you talked to.
Yeah, a guy named Mike Kronk. He's a retired teacher from Alaska. And just to pick up on the point you were just talking about, Brian, he told me that there were some military people, I don't know, off duty or people with military experience, who did at one point organize a plan of we got